Hello, welcome back to my channel, Angela Shows You. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about travel. So I did an episode the other day and we talked a little bit about packing and tips for when you are cruising. But today I wanted to take a minute and talk to you about travel, particularly traveling for a cruise. So, whether or not you are driving or flying to your port, I hope that you will find some of these tips and ideas helpful, useful, practical. So, let's dig right into it. So if you are flying to a cruise port, so for example, my husband and I are getting ready to go on an Alaskan cruise, and so we are going to be flying across the country. I had mentioned before that I live in New York State, and in order to take an Alaskan cruise, we are going to need to fly to the West Coast. So we are going to be flying to Seattle. So I'm very excited about this. I'm excited to spend a couple days in Seattle before our cruise. However, being said, I would like to point out that it's always a good option, choice, decision to fly into the port that you are going to be cruising out of at least the day before. You never know what's going on with the airlines. And I can give you a perfect example. Earlier this year, in February, actually, my husband and I flew to Las Vegas, and there was a storm, and we ended up being delayed a full day. We flew out of Buffalo, New York, and we were making a connecting flight in New York City, and then from New York City all the way out to Vegas. Well, there was some storm in New York City, and so we ended up stuck. We were at the airport for hours. I mean, like 9 or 10 hours. It was ridiculous. And then they finally called it at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. They said, no, we're not flying. They basically said, come back tomorrow. And so we ended up the airline put us up in a hotel that was right near the airport. And so we ended up going over to the airport, going to sleep, and then going back over at like 9 or 10 the next morning. And then we were able to do our flight. So the point being, my experience is that you don't know what the weather is doing in other parts of the country, and you want to make sure that you get on that boat. You want to make sure that you're there on embarkation day. The boat's not going to wait for you. So if you are trying to travel the day of your embarkation and there's any sort of delay, you are going to risk missing the cruise. And as far as I know, if you miss it, there's no refund. So it's well worth the $100 that a hotel is going to cost you to fly in the day before, make sure that you're there, and then you just have that peace of mind that you're there, you're in whatever city it is that you're leaving from, and you will be there the next morning when it's time to board the ship. So, couple things about that. If you're I'm looking down because I wrote a couple things down because there's a couple points that I wanted to say that I want to make sure that I don't miss them. So if you're flying in, then you will probably be taking a taxi or an Uber from the airport to your hotel. So a couple things that you might want to consider is if you are getting a hotel that maybe offers a shuttle to the cruise line. There are a lot of larger chain hotels that will offer a free shuttle, or even, a very inexpensive shuttles over to cruise terminals. When we did a cruise out of Florida, we found a hotel that we just took, we actually got a shuttle from the hotel over so they picked us up at the airport, brought us over to the hotel, and then the next day they actually did another shuttle from the hotel to the cruise line. So keep an eye when you're doing um, searches. If you're using Expedia or Travelocity or any of them, set some filters to include hotels that offer free shuttles to and from airports, to and from cruise terminals, because then, that's just a little bit of a money savings to not have to worry about arranging for an Uber. Usually all they do is they'll tell you, okay, if you're going on the cruise, come, if they know, especially if the lobby, if they know that they've got a bunch of travelers, like a group, they'll say, meet down here in the lobby in the morning, and the shuttle goes off every 30 minutes or whatever. So talk to them at the front desk when you check in, ask them, what's the transportation going to be like getting over to the cruise terminal, especially if you're all checked in and my check-in appointment is from 12 to 1, or I'm not checking in until 2 o'clock. They'll work with you on getting you over to the cruise terminal in a timely manner. If you are driving to your port, so for example, we did a cruise out of New York City once, we did a cruise out of Charleston, so we drove to those ports. So you might want to consider, if you're driving, either you're going to want to look and see ahead of time, how much does the parking per day or per week cost at the terminal. All the cruise terminals are different. Some cruise terminals, have a fairly reasonable weekly rate. Some of them are a little more expensive. Some terminals that we have parked at actually are in like this big gigantic building or parking garage, and then other ones it's just a huge parking lot. They do have security and they monitor them. I know everybody always is going to have a story about how, they heard that somebody's car was broken into at the cruise terminal, but honestly, any car can be broken into anywhere. So don't not park at a cruise terminal just because, heard that one car, was broken into. It's probably a pretty rare instance. However, that being said, if you can find a hotel that has a shuttle to the airport or to the cruise terminal, and they have like those park and fly or park and cruise, you could additionally save some money that way. I have a friend who is cruising out of Baltimore, in the hotel that she's staying at. She said the hotel was like $200, but it included the shuttle over to the cruise terminal, and it includes that they can leave their car right there at the hotel for the duration of her cruise, which is actually 14 days. So she wants to get down there the day before. She will get a shuttle over to the cruise terminal, and then she can park her car leave it right there at the hotel, and shuttle back when she gets back and to the hotel and get her car and go for $200. That is a wonderful price. So look into things like that too. If you're driving, if you want to get in the day before, allow yourself enough drive time. You never know what the roads are going to be like if there's construction or whatever. So arrive in the day before, see if you can leave your car right there, shuttle over, and then they'll pick you back up when the cruise is over. At the cruise terminal, bring you back, you get in your car, and you leave. So a couple different options for whether or not you are driving or flying, but ways to get to and from the airport and to and from the cruise terminal. In my last video, I talked a little bit about a cruise that we did in Florida, and when we got back, we were leaving. We were flying back home the same day as the day that the cruise came back. However, we ended up getting a later flight. It was later in the afternoon. So we did an excursion, a kind of a post-cruise excursion. It was through Carnival. I want to say it was like $40 or $50 a person, but it was a good way to kill. We had like 8 hours that before our flight was leaving. So this excursion was like 4 or 5 hours. We went into the Everglades. We did a fun excursion with alligators, and they put your luggage right on the bus. We bussed over to this excursion. We did this fun little boat ride, a little show, and then they bussed us back when it was time to leave, and the bus dropped everybody off right at the gate for the airline that they were flying. So it was fun, it was convenient, it was a good way to spend a little extra time in the area and not just sit at the airport all day doing really nothing. So just some thoughts and ideas of things that you can do when you get back. Now, like when we go out to Seattle, we are going 2 days before our cruise. So that's going to be fun because I've never been to Seattle and there's a lot to do. So, it's a good way to not only make sure that you are there well in advance, but if it's a place that you've never been to before, then you've got a day to explore the city where you're cruising out of. It'll be fun to go to the aquarium, hopefully go to the Space Needle, and do some other fun things while we're there. I would like to take a moment to mention this doesn't really have anything to do with traveling to or from the port itself, but while you're on your cruise, if you get off at any of the stops, please make sure that you pay attention to what time it is. You'll want to set your watch to the boat time. Oftentimes the boat time, the ship time is different than the wherever it is that you're at time. You want to make sure if you're going off on your own, especially if you're going off on your own, that you have the ship time on your watch so that you know what time it is, so that if they tell you we're leaving at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, you want to make sure that you're back before that, because unless you're taking a cruise ship sponsored excursion, they're not going to wait for you. So if you're just getting off at the port and you're hitting up shopping or a bar or whatever it is that you're doing at the port, and you don't pay attention to what time it is, they'll leave you. We have listened. They'll do some announcements over their PA system, and then on our last cruise we actually watched, and there were people who didn't make it back in time. So you don't want to be the person that misses getting back on the ship, and they have a schedule to keep. Not only do they need to be mindful of the port that they're at, if there's other cruise traffic going on or whatever, the city that you are visiting, there's a lot of rules, and so the cruise ship has to abide by rules of, if they agree that the cruise ship is going to be there from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, that come 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the cruise ship is preparing to leave. They have people there that are working who are helping the cruise ship pull away from the dock and, get back out into the water, and the cruise ship needs time to get to the next port. So be mindful of the time so that you get back and you get on board in a timely manner. Kind of the other thing that I thought that I would mention is, we find cruising to be a very cost-effective way to travel. There's so much that's included in your cruise fare, and you can really get a really, really good cruise fare if you're cruising on an off time. And by off time, I mean not during school breaks. We did do a big family vacation with our kids when they were younger, and so we went on spring break, and it was costly. It was a blast. It was a lot of fun. The kids, they were teenagers. They had so much fun meeting kids from all over. So it was fun for them. But if you're looking to do something a little bit more cost effective, if you don't have kids, then try and pick a time that the kids are in session. So for example, our Alaska cruise, there are a lot of schools in the United States who they've started going back. So school is in session now, or will be in the next week or two. So a good time to travel where there might be less kids is the end of August, the beginning of September. So if we were traveling with our kids, this would have been a great week, because in New York, our schools don't go back until usually somewhere around like the week of Labor Day. So it would be a great way to go when maybe there's not a whole lot of kids on, because kids in the southern states are back to school already, but we are not. So there will be less kids than going on spring break, where pretty much that 2-week period, everybody and their brother is off of school, and so it's going to be more crowded with kids. When we did our Panama Canal Transit cruise, we went in November. We actually left on like the weekend of following Thanksgiving, and there weren't really hardly any kids at all. In fact, I felt kind of bad for like the 6 kids that were on, because I was like, they don't have anybody. There's nobody to keep those kids company. Also, that was a 2-week vacation. It was a 14-day itinerary. So that's kind of a long cruise, probably for kids, but especially school age kids. It was after Thanksgiving. It was before Christmas. So a lot of parents aren't going to be pulling their kids out of school after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, for a 14-day itinerary. So there was not a whole lot of kids on that cruise. So it made it affordable, and there was not a whole lot of kids. So something else that you might want to keep in mind when you're looking for your itinerary, regardless of what cruise line you're going on, just something to keep in mind. If you have kids and you want to travel during a kid-friendly time, or if you have kids but you don't want to go on a busy time, or you don't have kids and so you either don't want to be around a whole lot of kids, or you're looking for something that's going to be reduced in your board and the cost that it's going to take to go. So just whichever way you're looking at it is going to kind of help drive your decision of when it is that you may want to book. And then the other thing that you might want to keep in mind is hurricane season. So if you're looking to do a cruise to Bermuda, Bahamas, etc., then you're going to probably want to take into consideration storm season. And if you're looking to travel, you might want to just look at some of the dates, go earlier in the hurricane season or later in hurricane season, and ask me how I know. So, kind of one other thing that I did want to mention is, if possible, whether you are driving or flying to the cruise terminal, there's going to be porters out there that will take your bags for you. On a personal note, I always try to make sure that if, my husband and I each have a suitcase, I try to keep, like $5 or $10 in my pocket. So when we get up to the cruise terminal and the porters are there, they're taking your bags, helping you to make sure that your bags get to where you want. We give them money because they're doing a service for us. But I do like to keep on me one bag, kind of a smaller bag that has a few essentials in it. And if you're cruising, um, like we're doing this Alaska cruise, so I don't know necessarily that a bathing suit is going to be on the top of my list of priorities. But most of the time when we're traveling, I keep that carry-on bag with me that has our license, some money in it, our boarding passes, our passports, and then I'll usually have, a bathing suit for each, myself and my husband, so that way we can change into our bathing suit if we want to and hit up a pool or a hot tub, because you have to keep in mind that oftentimes, there's hundreds, thousands of pieces of luggage that those porters are getting on the boat for you, and then all that luggage needs to be delivered to your stateroom, and your stateroom generally isn't available until 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're getting on, like we try to get on early so that we can have lunch when we get on. So like for the one that we have coming up, we chose a boarding time of, it's either 12 to 12:30 or 12:30 to 1 o'clock. So we'll get on, we'll have a bite to eat, and then if we want, we can change into our, your bathing suit and hop in a pool. So your luggage is not going to be in your room. And really, they do try to ask that you don't even go to your stateroom until 1 or 1:30 or even 2 o'clock, because the housekeeping staff is still trying to clean and prepare all the rooms from the people who just got off, and they're getting ready for everybody who is boarding for the next voyage. So keep a bag, if you have medications that you need to take at lunchtime, you may want to make sure that you keep your dosage in a carry-on bag so that when you board, you can have lunch, you can take, any noontime prescriptions that you may have. If you want a book, if you want your bathing suit, or anything that you think that you may want, pair of sunglasses, etc. Just keep those things on a small carry-on bag. I try not to make it super heavy because it is something that I have to lug around with me, from the time I get on, noon-ish, to 1:30, 2 o'clock. So I don't want a big bulky heavy bag, but I want something that's got a few of those basics. I usually, like I said, the bathing suit, a pair of sunglasses, maybe my Kindle or a book, and then of course a little bit of cash so that I can get our account set up. I try and do that when we get on before it starts getting really busy and there's a long line. We usually set up a cash account. I try not to do a credit card account. I usually do a cash account. So I try to do that before the line for that kiosk starts getting really long. I'll put on, $100, $200 into our cash account and just get that all squared away. So I hope that some of these thoughts and tips and ideas are helpful for you. I hope that whatever vacation that you're going on, you have a wonderful time, and I hope that you will leave comments in the comment section below with anything that I may have missed or something that has worked for you, or if any of the things that I mentioned don't work for you. Additionally, please feel free to share because others will benefit from your knowledge. Have a great day and happy vacation.